Hi everyone, I'm Anna Sofia, Head of Communications at the 50%. Thank you all for taking the time to join us today for this seventh session of the webinar series Voices for Peace. This series is a collective effort between several organizations: Greenpeace Africa, Roots, the Positive Peace Society from Hiroshima University, Climate Youth Resilience, the Desmond and Leah Tutu Legacy Foundation, Soka Gakkai, and Amnesty International. Today's sessions focuses on human rights and youth empowerment for planetary peace, hosted by Soka Gakkai and Amnesty International. Thank you to both teams for preparing such an engaging topic for today. So, Ruth, whenever you're ready, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I will just give the floor to Lucy, my colleague, for introduction remarks.
Thank you so much, Anna Sophia. And hello and warm greetings to everyone who's joined us today for this webinar on the important topic of human rights education and youth empowerment. So my name is Lucy Plummer. I'm the Youth Engagement Coordinator for Soka Gakkai International at the UN. And it's my pleasure to offer some opening remarks for today's webinar on behalf of SGI and Amnesty International, the partners for this webinar. So the World Programme for Human Rights Education, which is the UN's flagship programme on human rights education, was launched in 2004 and is currently in its fifth phase of development. The fourth phase, which concluded in 2024, focused on youth empowerment as a key component of human rights education, aligning with the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, specifically SDG Target 4.7, which aims to ensure that education equips learners with the knowledge and skills to promote sustainable development, including human rights education. The current fifth phase of the World Programme for Human Rights Education, which began this year in 2025, focuses on children and youth, emphasizing human rights education in three areas: human rights and digital technologies, the environment and climate change, and gender equality. Human rights education addresses the knowledge, skills, and attitudes that one requires to recognize, claim, and defend human rights, both one's own human rights and the rights of others. Human rights education has an important role to play in safeguarding against human rights abuses, as well as empowering individuals and communities to stand up against injustice and advocate for themselves. Human rights education can also help with social cohesion by promoting mutual understanding, tolerance, and peaceful coexistence between diverse groups, playing an instrumental role in building a culture of peace from the grassroots. In 2022, the human right to a healthy environment was recognized by the UN as integral to the enjoyment of other human rights, such as the right to life, health, water, and food. Indeed, human rights and environmental rights are profoundly interlinked, and it is this inseparability of humans' enjoyment of life and a healthy planet that finds deep appreciation in the idea of planetary peace. Failing to recognize this reality will make it harder to address the deep roots of conflict everywhere. So today we have a very inspiring set of speakers who are very well placed to speak to this topic. They are three human rights educators who are part of a project called Changemakers: Stories of Young Human Rights Educators, produced in partnership by SGI, Amnesty International, and the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights. I won't say anything about the speakers because they will be introducing themselves to us shortly. So just to conclude, I'll say that all across the world, we see, deplorable acts of human rights abuses playing out before our very eyes, whether in countries far away from our own or closer to home and with our own communities. We feel the suffering because of our shared humanity. Our hope for today is that everyone here will feel uplifted by the discussion and gain a renewed sense of hope and courage in each of the areas of our work. enhanced by a feeling of solidarity from various parts of the world. And we truly are, represented from many different parts of the world today. So thank you again, once again, for joining us. Please enjoy this discussion and please do get involved in the interactive segments. So with that, I pass over to, I believe, Emmy, our wonderful moderator for the discussion. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lucy. Actually, it goes to Ruth.
It's a collaborative space now. We wanted to start with a little bit of an interaction activity. So Emily, Emmy, oh my God, with the names today. I'm so sorry. I'm confusing all the names today, and it's only Tuesday. So Emmy and I have worked together in creating this Menti. She will share, or if not, I can share the link on the chat, and we will like you to let me see if I find my chat. We would like you to write one word or three, because it gives you that possibility that what word comes to mind when you think about human rights education. We wanted to do this exercise for all of you, and we wanted to give you a couple of minutes. Oh, I see that people are already inputting in the Menti. So we wanted to set the scene to see what the participants on the webinar today think, or what comes to their mind when they think about human rights education. So you will have around 1 minute. I posted the link, the Menti, in the chat, and I see that some questions are coming. I will give you maybe half a minute, and they will be coming. We also see how many people are, writing on the Menti. You can also write in other languages if you feel like. So it doesn't need to be necessarily only in English. And thank you for the people to introducing themselves in the chat too. I see that people are sending greetings from different places. They're joining from Algeria. Thank you for saying hi, Rekia. So if you also feel like, feel free to say hello in the chat to the rest of the participants. I see that we have 3 more that they may be writing on the Menti. Hi, Mercy from the UK. Hi, Sarah from Morocco. Aziza, also from Morocco. Nice to have you in the webinar today. Okay. But I see, I really like what I'm seeing here. And this will, I think, is a good start as an activity. Hi, Asima from India, but joining from Japan. Wow, that's nice. So, welcome. So I think we have quite a good number of people who have already used the link, and it's a very nice. Thank you, Emmy, for sharing the screen. So when it comes up on human rights education, no pressure for our young educators later on. It becomes hope, justice, dignity, empowerment, awareness, courage, peace. And then it comes also in a smaller, so I hope you can all read and see the screen. But I mean, the 3 big ones that we can start with when we think about human rights education is, will help us with hope, justice, dignity. And also it's about awareness, it's about empowerment, but it also requires courage. And I guess it's also linking with the series of Voices for Peace. It's nice to see also the peace word coming up in the Mentimeter there. But there is, I like that, happy life. yeah, I hope human rights education will help with happy life too. It's also transformative. That is something that we like to talk very much about. It's about transformation. It's about social change. And also we like to think that it's also thinking, do I see any action here? Maybe, we will see. Is how human rights education, this is kind of setting the scene, and then we will link it with the rest of the webinar with youth empowerment and how can human rights education leads to change. Thank you. I think this was a nice activity. Thank you, Emily, for sharing the screen. And I hope it has helped us set a little bit the scene and now I really do give the floor to Emmy for the next part of our webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruth. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone joining us around the world. My name is Emmy, and I will be your moderator for today's dialogue on Voices for Peace, Human Rights Education, and Youth Empowerment for Planetary Peace. It's quite wordy, but I hope we all remember the keywords, human rights education and youth empowerment. So today we're joined by 3 inspiring human rights educators who will share how human rights education empowers young people to build peaceful, sustainable communities. But before we begin, as Lucy had said, they're really amazing. So we would like them to introduce themselves. Maybe Aizat, then Ifran, and then Sufyan.
Yes, hi everyone. I can start. My name is Aizat Ruslanova. Warm greetings from Kyrgyzstan, Central Asia. I work at IDEA Central Asia. It is a youth-led organization. And as an executive director, I lead youth-centered human rights education and civic leadership programs across Kyrgyzstan and the wider region. And my work covers school-level human rights education curricula, teachers' trainings, and youth-led campaigns that connect human rights, democratic participation, and social cohesion. And I also co-design youth-centered standards with government and UN partners. And I try to empower and mentor Gen Z leaders to turn learning into action safely, inclusively, and with measurable impact. So that's all about me, and I want to give the floor to Irfan. Irfan, please.
Thank you so much, Azat. It's always great to connect with you and all the amazing friends from around the world. My name is Irfan Mangera. I am a youth activist, community-based educator, and organizer in South Africa, in Johannesburg, South Africa. I am excited to be here with you all. I primarily work at Constitution Hill, which is a place where we teach about constitutional literacy, human rights education. We bring young people on a tour. It's a World Heritage Site, so it's a very exciting space to work, but also sad because this was a former prison during apartheid where women and all people like Nelson Mandela and others were kept in prison. I wear many hats, like Azat, also doing work around empowering young leaders to take up action and to also contest in elections so that we no longer have old leaders leading us, but we also have younger people who are energized and bring new ideas. So that's me. Over to you, Sophia.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Irfan. Thank you, Aizat. I'm very happy to share this space with you. And yeah, so my name is Sufyan. I'm from Morocco. I'm podcaster. I created in 2020 the platform Meshirjula, which means not so muscular. And it's a platform to promote inclusive masculinities. I'm also a researcher working on gender equality and reflecting about new masculinities. and how can we promote it in Morocco to fight against patriarchy, against injustices in general in society. And yeah, and I'm so happy to be here and to share this space with you all. Thank you.
Thank you all so much. Sorry, do you want to say more? It's okay. Okay. Thank you again so very much for your introductions. So to set the stage, we want to explore how each of you personally connects with today's theme. So for you, what do human rights and human rights education mean to you? Ifran, do you want to go first, or Sufyan?
Yes, sure thing. Thank you so much. I think for me, when I think about human rights, I think about it's a very simple idea, but profound because it's this idea that every single person matters. And I say profound because in a world that we're living in today, it seems like human life is valued less and less and less, and money and material things are weighted more and more. And unfortunately, that's what we have to comprehend with. It's not because of people's status or background or proximity to power or religion. It's because they are fundamentally and are human beings. In South Africa, these aren't theoretical concepts and ideas because we've experienced generations of indignity, of the stripping away of people's rights. And like I mentioned, I'm currently sitting in an office that was a former prison for women. And even in that prison, young women from the ages of 11 and 12 and 30 were brought here because they believed that the system of apartheid was wrong. So human rights to me are both a promise, but it's also this responsibility that no one should be left behind and that each of us should cultivate a consciousness and a way of being that respects and at least honors other people's lives. And therefore, human rights education is the bridge. It's between the bridge between that promise that we are all one, that we all matter, to the reality that unfortunately, the current context shows us that conflict and violence and inequality is in existence, and so it allows us to then bridge those differences to turn knowledge into power, but also frustration and anger that many of us are feeling into voice, into using our voices as tools for active change, so that we no longer sit back as beneficiary or as young people being considered as um, people who are going to take information, but who use information to reshape what the future could look like.
Wow. Sufyan, would you like to share?
Yeah, for me, I will answer to the question in a very personal way. I think for me, like when it comes to human rights, it's about three words, at least for me and the way that I understand human rights. It's about action, creativity, and impact. I think action because like I don't want to be inactive. I prefer to be active front of all the injustices that we see in the world when it comes to gender inequalities, but also injustices in general, war, like all kind of injustices in the world. Creativity, because like it's something that I need in my work as a human rights activist to protect myself. And it's like I consider it as a space for me, to create, to reflect, but also to exist. Because like when we are, at least in some contexts, when we are human rights activists, we expose ourselves, to a lot of, I don't want to say danger, but at least, hate speech, a lot of people react to our activism. So creativity give us this space, to exist as a human rights educator. And also the impact, it's important for me because this is how we understand, you know, the action that we create in the world. And when it comes to impact, it's not only on people but also on ourselves as a person, because human rights activism, it's also the work that we do also on ourselves, you know. I don't know, when it came to gender equality, as a man, I deconstruct myself as well, and all the stereotypes that I learned as a child and as a citizen and as a person, as a man in the world. So yeah, for me, it's in this three words: impact, creativity, and action in society.
Well, it's really amazing. Aizat, would you like to share what human rights education means to you?
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much for the question, and thank you so much to my colleagues, Sufyan and Irfan. I totally agree with them. And for me, human rights are about rules of fairness, that allow every person, especially young people, different minority rules into everyday decisions, schools, families, media, communities, and human rights education. It's not about theory class, it's about practice, using rights language to design safer classrooms, inclusive events, and accountable instruction. And for example, in our work, we treat each participant as a rights holder and a change agents. And that's why we pair lessons with action tools, debate, campaigns, community audits, and use budgets. And one quick example from my background, our youth leadership modules with in persuasion, argumentation, and constructive response to failure. So rights aren't just values, they become skills for life. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Aizat. I'm so sorry. Do you mind just summarizing what you had started saying? Because the internet was a bit sketchy.
Yes, I'm so sorry for my internet connection because of different restrictions from government. There are a lot of internet shutdowns in Kyrgyzstan and in all countries of Central Asia. For me, human rights education and human rights are not just values or documents. They become skills for life, for everyday life. Thank you. I get, yeah.
Thank you so much. The three of you mentioned about working closely with communities. Aizat, you talked about Gen Z. Sufyan, you talked about male, male. And then, Ifran talks about youth and encouraging people to know their rights. So from your experience, how can community level issues be addressed using human rights approaches? Sufyan, do you want to go first?
Yes, sure. Like for me, when it comes to human rights approach, it's I mean, it's the meaning. It's the center of all the human reactions in society. A human rights approach, it's the only way to bring all the community together and fight against all the injustices. And this is why I think like when I start the work that I do, for me it was like you know, to in my local context, I observed as a man that you know, the majority of the men that I know considerate all the woman fights as a feminine fights. You know, like I'm not concerned, so I don't wanna I don't wanna be interested about that. And I observed that like in so many injustices in society, you know, when it came to racism, like, you know, I mean, white people, they consider it that, you know, they are not concerned in the majority of the time. So for me, the beginning, it was like to ask myself the question, it's like, how me as a man can I work, you know, change the world and create this space, you know, like equal for everyone. Now I understood and very early by, you know, voices of women and by, you know, learning women rights education, you know, that's I think the only way for a man to have the impact is to work on himself, you know. I think, and for me it was so important, like to it's like when I'm not concerned by injustices, it doesn't mean that I need to be inactive and to do nothing. It means that I have to work and to understand how me as a person can I work on myself to contribute to this you know, equal space and to this inclusive space. So I think this is the human rights approach. It's like how every one of us can do something, you know, to create this equal world. And when we are not concerned, it doesn't mean that we have to stay, you know, like just okay, I'm not concerned, so I will do nothing. I don't know if I answered to the question directly, but I'm sure that Aizat and their fan will bring more elements about that. Maybe
Thanks for
Irfan
that.
can.
Yeah,
Thank you.
no, thanks for that, Sufyan. I actually like that view because it centers the person and people and community and the individual who needs to do some work, right? And that's the thing about human rights education that I love so much is that it forces and challenges us as individuals to think about how we show up in the world. In my case, you know, the organization I work for now is called We the People of South Africa. And that comes from our constitution. It's known globally because it came about after a peaceful negotiation, somewhat peaceful negotiation between a former minority government and oppressive government to a democratic government. And the lines of the constitution that's it starts with is that we, the people of South Africa, recognize the injustices of our past, honor those who suffered injustice and freedom in our land, who suffered for justice and freedom in our land, and respect those who have worked to build and develop our country. It goes on, but for the purposes of this point, you know, we the people is an instruction, is that for us to make sure human rights are realized for everyone, we all have to do something to make it possible. And so I think human rights education forces us to question differently, right? It says instead of, oh, violence is everywhere, we've just accepted it. It says instead of looking at questions that, you know, exist where, you know, so many people are hungry, it forces us and challenges us to think about, oh, but how do we build institutions that protect women? How do we build institutions that make sure everyone has an education? Is it possible for the community to come together and make sure no one goes hungry? So human rights education forces us to rethink the questions we ask as individuals, but also as communities. And in my experience, also because South Africa has many different issues. The most recent that I found fairly interesting was when we brought a group of students and learners who are probably about 15 years old to Constitution Hill. We took them to the Constitutional Court. They got to meet a judge. They spoke to them, and a lot of the experiences they live with, access to water, crime and safety, are what they raised in the meeting or in the workshop. And something fascinating that came out is that post the workshop, they had a very different view about people who were different to them. And I say this in a context where issues of xenophobia, othering, and discrimination still exist in South Africa. And so I found that through this kind of human rights education approach, we were able to shift the mindset to make it more humanist, to see people as humans, and then after solve the systemic problems that exist. I think lastly, let me say that the impact of this process is very visible. Throughout my over 8 years of popular education work, I've seen how young people go from being aloof from being very adverse or ignorant about situations that didn't concern them, to where they are actually driving community-based change and convincing local leaders that we shouldn't treat people who come from a different country this way, or we shouldn't um, have the kind of racist biases that we have, and it's all as a result of human rights education. And perhaps, Isaac, you have some insights that might be of value here.
Thank you so much, Irfan and Sofyan. I'm really inspired of your answers, and I just wanted to add that, for example, for me in Kyrgyzstan, in Central Asia, work through human rights approach, it's about building different connections between different actors, between GMG groups and government, and how we are addressing different socio-economic issues, political issues to government and municipality. And we start from rights, human rights and freedoms and duties of government, map who is affected, and co-design practical instructions with those communities. It keeps solutions inclusive and sustainable. For example, we tried to build safe and inclusive youth spaces with the Ministry of Culture of Kyrgyz Republic, and with different development partners. We helped define a framework for these centers, standards on non-discrimination, safeguarding, participation, and basic service quality. And we try to translate standards into checklists, training modules, and simple reporting forms. And the staff of these youth centers now uses them to improve access for these centers for girls, and for rural youth. And for me and for organization where I work, the human right lens gives us criteria, inclusive, non-discrimination, lawful voice. It's about youth co-decide and accountability. So communities see the difference between different programs, project for them, and a project or program with them. So this is how human rights approach work for us in Kyrgyzstan.
Thank you all so much for sharing. I think a lot of the words you've said, especially talking about working on the self, taking accountability, it's really showing how championing human rights isn't very easy. It requires a lot of courage, a lot of resilience and leadership, which I think a lot of us can see in the three of you. So as young people working in this space, what does it mean for you to take on this role? Maybe Aizat, if you'd like to go first.
I'm so sorry, I didn't hear the question because of internet connection. Could you please?
I'm happy to repeat the question. I was just wondering, because you require a lot of courage and resilience and leadership in the type of work you're doing, what does it mean for you to take on this role working in this space?
Thank you. Thank you so much for your question. For me, youth leadership means shared leadership. When young people set agendas, test solutions, and evaluate outcomes, supported by different stakeholders, by government, by, I don't know, NGOs, by media, by parents, schools, so by adults. How I navigate resistance, I just start with micro actions on community level and try to do that action visible and safe for all community members. I try to use learning loops after each activity. What worked? What should we change? And how do these action affect? And the big, I don't know, the big resource for me and for us as an organization is coalitions and partnership. When we unite different action on one platform, it is a really good instrument to do positive changes. So for this is all from my side. Thank you. Maybe Irfan or Sofyan, could share more details, more instruments, how use leadership.
Sure. Happy to go. And thanks for that, Azit. You actually covered so much, and it's so nice to know that there's common practices, because coalition building, coordination work are so important for us as young leaders in the space we're in human rights, because it can be very lonely at times. It can be isolating. And often those who don't like human rights will try to isolate you. They'll try to make you feel like you are crazy for believing that everyone should be respected and supported. And in a context and a world where human rights backsliding is happening in many countries, in some of the biggest democracies in the world, it's important for us to not fall back and feel like we are powerless. And so for me, it's about courage. It's about courage in a time where so much is going wrong, whether it's a genocide in Gaza, in Sudan, in the Congo, all parts of the world, that so much of conflict and human suffering is happening. We really have to have the courage to stand up. And I'm saying this because I come from a legacy of responsibility, of people who fought for my freedom today, of people who gave up their lives and sacrificed in struggle. But we still see around us huge inequality, unemployment, climate change, so devastating to many communities. So for me, that lesson on leadership comes from how do we build bigger platforms, bigger tables in which young people can learn from each other, learn from different generations. How do we organize ourselves so that we become a powerful force globally to express human rights centric perspectives that rechange the way our institutions work, to make sure that institutions actually work to deliver on human rights. And like we're seeing in the various international architecture. Perhaps just the last point, because I'm wary of time, is that I think we need to move away from the old way of conceptualizing leadership as this idea of a title of somebody with vast authority. I think we are all leading. We all have influence in our space, and so for us to take on responsibility, to take on the care and consideration for others comes with the idea that we are leading in that space. Even if you are a trainer, an educator, working in a classroom or a civil society group, you are influencing in different ways, and therefore you're using power, and therefore you are a leader. And I think we should then use this new way of being in that we don't need the titles to be considered leaders. People and young people globally are showing us that movements have been built and are being strengthened by the idea that if you share common values, if you speak with courage and engaged in the uncomfortable realities of what the world should look like and could look like, then you are able to lead. And so perhaps, Sufyan, you can add some more wisdom here, because that's currently what I'm thinking about in my head for the last few months on the role of leadership, but also how we build stronger platforms and coordination spaces and coalitions amongst ourselves. Even though we might not agree on every single thing, there is at least 10 things we agree on, and we can at least work around those 10 things.
Thank you, Erfan, and thank you, Aizat and Erfan, for your inspiring answers. For me, I think it's, yeah, I mean, from my point of view, I believe in the leadership, but specifically in the inclusive leadership, because I think it's like in the world that we are living today, even leadership, like sometimes there is kind of instrumentalization of leadership in a new capitalist world, and that like leadership, it's kind of something, it's like genius, it's like something we come to the world with it, and we have it or we don't have it. I think it's leadership, it's part of our daily action. And at least in my understanding, leadership starts, somewhere in when we have an action to do. Um, I mean, leadership. It's something that it's when we start something. I mean, an action in my and like until we do it for the first time, like people they think it's impossible, and when we do it in the beginning, people will think that it's useless, and we will not have an impact. And then when we do with time, and when people understand the impact of our actions, then they know that it's important, and for me this is leadership, and it's something related to all the actions actually in the world and in our daily life. In my and like for me also, leadership, it's about sometimes individual actions. Of course, it can be collective actions. In my experience, I start with the very individual action. I was like just thinking about like how can I talk about masculinities in my society to deconstruct what it was like for me in my point of view wrong, the bad way to be a man in society. And then the idea that I had, it was about creating a podcast. And then when I created the podcast, for sure, some people consider it that it's not, good to do that, but others, they understood the impact of what I'm doing. And then I created the community, and like in the beginning, it was individual action, but now I'm, working with a group of individual in the Moroccan society. So I think leadership is it's also something like I don't know how to say that kitchen, like preparing something with hand, like for me it's like this is leadership. It's how we start in the beginning. We have the courage to do something, and but also it's very important. It's how to keep it in society and how to do to create something sustainable in society to have more impact with time.
Well, it's really amazing to hear that, despite all these challenges you face, you really continue to inspire hope and action. And it's it's really touching for me to also hear, the different work that you're doing and how even like you're not letting any setback, stop you from. I've even lost my train of thought because I'm just really so inspired. But you're really amazing people. So, but I have a last question. How has human rights education or how has your work shaped your understanding of peace and sustainability? Sufyan, you're on my screen, so maybe you can go first.
Um, okay, I mean, for me, you know, I think it's I understood as a person that human rights like we have impact and we create peace with human rights in our daily by the impact in our daily life, like I when I was I mean I don't know when I was younger I was thinking that big actions are more important than small actions, Like for me, it was like how I will create something, how I will have the biggest impact this kind of, because it's something that we learn actually at school, and sometimes in our education by our parents and by the community as well and by the order of the world. I think now by the work that I do, I think for me human rights and the impact of human rights in terms of peace and sustainability, it's by the small actions. It's how what I do in general in my work, like creating podcasts, I don't know, to be in this space, have this exchange with you. The most important thing, it's like the small actions and idea that I will take with me in my daily life, I think this is the most important impact that we can have as an activist and as a human. It's like how I mean, I can learn all the books about masculinities and learn all the theories about feminism, but at the end of the day, it's like how I will interact as a human in my life, in my interactions with other women, with other men, with other communities, with other individuals in society. So I think this is the most important way to do transmission in society. It's the cumul. It's like when we add all these small things that we learn every day and we create impact and we inspire people. I mean, our friends, our community. Yeah, this is my understanding of this impact in terms of peace. And maybe I thought I'm very curious to know how you.
Thank you so much, Sofyan. It's really, yeah, it was really inspirative speech. And for me, a human rights human rights taught me to look beyond the different slogans and focus on real human rights that work in our in my country. And peace isn't the absence of noise or conflicts or wars. It's about the clear, inclusive rules that protects me, you, and everyone in school, in university, online, in the street, in the local institution. And for example, Central Asia, especially Kyrgyzstan, is the most dangerous place for women. Yeah, it is. It is just statistics and different ratings. And in Central Asia and Kyrgyzstan, and really anywhere with multiple languages, migration, urban and rural gaps, and strong online spaces, human rights education turns big words like dignity, equality, participation into repeatable habits and real actions from government sides, understandable community rules, predictable feedback channels, respect for languages and different identities, and transparent decision making. It also, yes, human rights education also reframed sustainability for me. Sustainability from NGOs lens. It's it is not a project that lasts. It is a system that includes who gets to participate, who decides, who is protected when we don't have any resources like water, air, energy, even, I don't know, digital rights. If instruction and procedures are accessible, multilingual, and easy to use, that they outline leadership changes, budget shifts, and trends. And from my perspective, for young people anywhere, human rights education offers three keys. Participation as a skill, when young people can co-create policies, concepts, rules, and decision on the national level, from classroom to the city services. The second one is safety as a baseline, and safety for all, for young people, for girls, and for different minority groups. And the last one is transparency as a habit. Publish clear criteria, timelines, and roles, so trust doesn't depend on heroes and I don't know, miracles. So thank you. Irfan, do you want to answer on this question?
Yes, thank you. And it's, I guess, similar. But thanks to both of you and to everyone else for joining, because one thing that I also want to state is, I know you're listening to us, but we may not have all the answers, and we're also learning as we go along. And that's the beauty of this human rights education approach, is shared learning and understanding of different contexts in the world that can all be connected some way and somehow. I think fundamentally it's the knowledge and understanding that we at least in my opinion, because a lot of my first activism came from, solidarity work around the Palestine issue. And to understand that made me understand that peace can't exist simply because there's no conflict or because there's an absence of it. And in South Africa's example, the same thing happened. Colonialism, then apartheid rule, brutal as it was, including that on my family, where our home was forcibly removed, meaning it was bulldozed. They had to then disperse to go and live 30, 40 kilometers away. And, you know, even understanding that experience for me over the years came with the realization that they still carry, legacies of traumas in their hearts, legacies of pain in their hearts. And, to find peace means, yes, we have to do the individual spiritual work of healing. But what also has to be realized in order to get there is the structural justice and the structural peace work, because peace needs to also become a lived experience, a communal experience, and it requires us to really, I want to say, it does require us to be more vocal about injustice that is happening. It's somewhat making many of us as young people feel disillusioned by what we see around us. But even in the most heightened times of despair, I think we all recognize that peace is still possible, that we can unite difference towards a common agenda, towards a common understanding. And for me, that's where the hope lies. It's that silver lining that says, we've seen different cycles of violence that lead into different periods and eras of peace, and it is possible. I've run hundreds of workshops now, and I can tell you the ability for young people to tell their stories of pain and turn it into possibility and hope. There was just 2 months back a learner who, after our teaching and training, said that she wants to become a paramedic, and a paramedic because in her lived experience, in her community, her friend was shot and killed. And as a result of that experience, because she couldn't save her, her mission in life is to make sure that she can save others. And for me, I found that inspiring because in as much as that was a violent act that had stripped somebody's life away, and you feel the pain around it. It's about then building support and building infrastructure and institutions and even individuals who then say, I don't want that to be the reality. I want to be a paramedic so that in my community, it doesn't take 2 hours for the ambulance to come. And so I do think a lot of the work we do must be more bolder around saying, peace can't exist when we have such extreme inequality, when we have such extreme poverty, where we're just seeing the richest people in the world continue to get rich while everyone else continues to suffer. And so I think we can achieve it through dialogue. And the more we speak, the more we engage, the more we connect with each other like this, I think we will find peace and we will be able to make dignity a real life experience for everyone. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you all so much. Those are really powerful stories and insights. And I'm sure, like many other people listening, we have a lot to learn from you. And and excuse me, probably have many questions as well. So we will now move on to the Q&A session with Lucy.
Thank you so much. I'm sorry if I zoned out, but Sofian, did you respond to that last question? Did you have Sofian? Did you respond?
Yeah, I think I did it.
Well, thank you.
I hope that I did it.
No, I think I was busy looking for questions in the chat, but thank you all so much. Really wonderful, rich discussions already. So thank you so much. And I'm aware, yeah, Aizat had to leave us. But if there are any questions for Aizat specifically, please do feel free to put them in the chat, and we will get them to Aizat. We have a couple of, well, a remark from Rakea. I wondered if you wanted to take the opportunity, Rakia, sorry if I mispronounced your name, to share your input, or ask a question based on what you shared. I can maybe turn that into a bit of a question that I was thinking, because you mentioned kind of the role of religion and how it can also help promote human rights, and also, be used to respond positively to global issues. So I wonder if Sofiane or Irfan, if you wanted to share any thoughts on maybe how faith or kind of religion connects to human rights in this, or concept of human dignity that we find common in religious and faith teachings. If that question speaks to you, please feel free to share some thoughts on that.
Happy to. I am a Muslim, and so I do practice my religion, and I've learned so much about being human by learning about my religion. A lot of my activism on care, on dignity, stems from some of those teachings, and I think I yes, I think there is this human rights framing in many religions globally. I was going to quote Buddha earlier by speaking about that all life is suffering, and this idea that there's always this constant struggle, and we have to deal with that struggle. We have to confront those struggles, and at least in my faith, I've I've learned to give, to be a person who shares, who builds community, and I'm finding fascinating some trends about how in certain areas, mosques have become spaces where anyone who's suffering can come access help and support. And so I do think it's a big part of it. I think it's also it there is extreme elements in all religions, and I think we also have to be wary of those things. But generally speaking, the world over, there are religions who continuously are driving human rights and making sure that institutions are there to protect and uphold human rights. But on the flip side of it, we also see the erasure of certain people through some institutions. And I think it's important to be wary of that, to have caution and critique about that, so that even within those religions, people learned to reflect, including Islam, to learn to understand that they equally can be at fault, because these ultimately religions are belief systems, but individuals may not fully believe in them. They may not fully practice them, and as humans, we are all flawed in nature, and so we can err in many ways.
Great, thank you so much. Yeah, I want to maybe just hold those thoughts for a moment and see if anybody else would like to come in on this topic. We have a couple of other questions which will get to, but even anyone from who's participating as audience member, we'd like, really for this to be a space where you can also share some thoughts and engage in a dialogue with Sofiane and Irfan too. So I'll just give a few seconds for anyone else to come in.
I was just going to thank you so much for sharing amazing reflections and learning so much. But just on the point of I think Irfan, you just mentioned about how religion across the globe can be a space where people are sort of are encouraged to really care for one another and the planet, but also being mindful of how people take interpretations. So I was just thinking, just adding to the point that there are also really spaces where we can sort of mobilize and build coalitions. And some of that work requires us being aware of the sort of I guess, blind spots on how our conditioning informs how we're going to interpret our practices, and how I don't think any single person or group or religious ideology or belief system is removed from the context in which it operates in. So just being aware of that of that, as well as also respecting and acknowledging how they are extremely important to empower and build coalitions and promote human kindness alongside the social context in which they operate in.
Thank you so much, Masi. We have a couple of questions from Ashima and Joan. I wonder, Ashima, would you like to ask your question? I'm happy to read it, but if you can ask it, it would be great.
Oh, wow. Okay. I'm sorry. Can you see me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I was just really, really moved, and it's very rare to have such amazing leaders of positive masculinity. So I my parents are also educators, and I have an educator background. So this is something we really struggled with in schools, and I think it's also a global issue now with male loneliness. And I think a recent show called Adolescence was, really showed how difficult this situation is becoming world over. And I wondered if you had any kind of advice or concrete actions that schools can take to create a safer environment, not just for women, but also for men and young boys themselves. So, any kind of insight would be really valuable. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ashima, for your question and for your comment as well. I think, like, for me, when it comes to education, it's like something, in the same time individual, but also, for me, it's a structural problem, at least in some contexts, because education, it's political as well, I remember when I was at school, it was very complicated, to learn about human rights, because it's political, and because sometimes it's forbidden, to teach some. And I think it's not only in my context, because I follow a little bit what is happening, in Europe, for example. I follow how, how some political movements, they are fighting, to close, the door of schools for, for NGOs, for some groups, to, to talk about LGBT rights, to talk about, mental health, etc. But I still, this is why, I consider it's a political fight, and it's, we have to fight structurally to, to keep the school as a safe space, to educate, and to have, inclusive education, and to give the maximum of knowledge, to men and women and communities and individuals, but also teachers, because, sometimes in the majority of the time, human rights education, it's also learning, it's knowledge. But I believe also, and this is from my personal experience, I believe in personal impact and individual impact. When I was teenager, I had, the political context in my country. It was like difficult to talk about human rights, to talk about gender equality at school, I mean. But I had some inspiring teachers, and sometimes they talk to you just about a movie, just about a book. They give you, in a very simple way, but it's like they give you, access to some resources, and it can, as a child and as a teenager, it can change your life completely. So I think it's education. It's also about that. It's about, to be emotionally also connected to this to the students, and to know sometimes, like, I remember when I was at school, I had this philosophy teacher. She came to me one day, and she gave me a book, and, like, I think she understood that I needed this book in this time, and yeah, I think teaching it also, but it maybe doesn't change, the world, but it can change, like, actions like that can change, the world of one person, you know what I mean? So, yeah, is I don't know, Irfan, if I know that you you believe in that as well. So
Yes, yes, Sufyan, but I think you best placed to answer compared to me. I just wanted to give more, context specific, because South Africa is currently going through a massive GBV crisis, a crisis of femicide, and these are conversations we're all having at a national level, and part of that is this linking to this question around, oh, but what of men? Because the conversations then end up being in the same circle of women. But in order to break the cycle of violence abuse, we really have to target how do we teach and engage men in rethinking how they should show up in the world. And it's practical experience. I mean, I myself schooled. We grew up with friends, and the kind of conversations we had were horrendous. And you look back and reflect on how emotionally out of touch we were. How we didn't. It was taboo, or it was looked down upon to feel your feelings, to have a space to cry, to be friends in a way that is loving, but also that doesn't make, it's the question around masculinities that Sufyan is speaking about. And so I'm raising these points because I think it's through the education work we do in the organizations or institutions we create, like schools, creating space where young men can express themselves and not feel shame about it is important. I think we really have to interrogate gender norms as well, because part of that conversation is the isolation that men end up feeling. So teaching empathy, looking at what care work how care work could exist in society. Um, I think this then brings into a broader public health problem, right? So what services are provided by state or government, or just as communities, are we creating conditions where mental health support is available, and stigma can be challenged? And all of these can be addressed through human rights education, I think. I think it also, we spoke of religion just now, so I also want to throw in here, many of our cultures also re-emphasize or reinforce some of these ideas. And it's important to interrogate them. It's important to, like you said, work with those institutions and bring out the data, bring out the stats as activists to say, this is the crisis that's happening. So it doesn't end up becoming a thing that's swept under the rug, but rather a conversation that can be had with mutual respect, but that allows for healthy ways of developing processes and programs that can actually address the core of it. But very good question. Thank you for sharing it.
Yeah, that was a great question. Thank you, Ashima. We have another question from Joan around solidarity. I wonder, Joan, are you there, and are you happy to, ask your question directly?
I am, but I'm also conscious that the last question, was opening up such important discussions that if there's anyone else who wanted to comment on that one first, I'm also happy to wait.
Very kind of you, Jen. I mean, Mercy, your response, it looks like a response and a question based on that topic. Do you want to share and then we can go back to Joan?
Yes, we're just building on, I guess, what everyone else has asked, but I was just thinking in the context of just getting some feedback or, yeah, advice on the people working in this space. We're trying to sort of engage young boys, young men across formal education sectors and informal spaces. And I was just wondering what in your experiences have you found to be avenues that are more conducive to getting like the curiosity, because it starts with like a curiosity, and then using that to draw in disillusioned, particularly young boys and men who feel like disenfranchised in many ways because there's structural issues that impact people across genders, but drawing them in and keeping that curiosity to actually connect them to larger human rights activities and sort of embed in that framework alongside like what strategies or what have you found most useful in pushing through that initial resistance that you might get. So any advice would be really appreciated because this is a piece of work that I think we're going to be focusing on significantly going forward.
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you, Merci. I can go first. I think I will speak from my experience and in my context, because I think it's a very diverse way to interact with that, like over the world, because I worked actually on, inclusive masculinities in Morocco and also in other countries, and I observed sometimes the differences between and like how for example in Morocco it's something related very it's very related to the language as well. For me it was like very important to use the very local language, the Moroccan language, not only as a language, but also in the way that I use that, to use, the same words, the same way to speak this language, to be in touch with the maximum of men, and like yeah, for me, I was like out of my comfort zone as an individual, in terms of languages. I had to learn sometimes, the meaning of some words, and actually it was the origin of, the name of the platform, Meshi Rojula, which is means it means like you are not a man. So I took this word and I tried like to to give another meaning to this word, So it was like it's kind of how we call that in English, um, uh, like how to say that, like what we did with the queer word, queered in the beginning, it was, very bad word, and then we changed the meaning. So it's very important, I think, to do that, but also like to be innovation in terms of of tools, like for me like using the podcast, but also like using the social media, and like in a very young way, and to occupy actually some spaces like where people like sometimes we don't talk enough about human rights in in some spaces. Like for I remember when I started my podcast, it was like one of the only podcasts about something related to human rights in my country. Like podcast, it was something related to entertainment, to other things, but not to learning about human rights. Yeah, so I think this is some, like sometimes people they resist, but it's important. And also, I have this idea. For me, it's very important to talk about the impact of toxic masculinity, sexism, and patriarchal system on the daily life of everyone, and also the impact on the life of men as well, because like this idea, I think like we don't talk enough about it in the mainstream spaces, but like there is a price of the patriarchal system on men in terms of mental health, in terms of and like it's I mean it's not it's something scientific today we know about it, in terms of physical impact, suicide. I mean, a lot of problems, and it's medical, it's scientific. So for me, it was also like a way to connect with men and to talk about these topics. I'm like, we are not talking about something that you are not concerned in the first way about it. We are talking about something that you are concerned by, and and it's something that have bad impact on your daily life. So I think it's like all these tools, with all these tools, sorry, we can create something.
Irfan, did you have anything to share on that? You're good, yeah? Joan, should we go back to your question? It was a great one.
Okay, well, yeah, I've just been so inspired. I'm also working with SGI, and I've been so inspired by this Change Makers project and learning about the work that each of you is doing in your, very different contexts, but there seem to be so many resonances between your work and the situations you're each in. And I'm just really interested to know what it's been like for you guys to be on these sort of parallel but very diverse journeys, and how much you feel you've benefited from this connection through this project. Thank you.
Thank you. Perhaps I can take a shot at it. I found tremendous value. I've learned so much. We're hoping to see each other in the next few weeks, once again at an engagement. But Sufyan was in Johannesburg, for example, a couple of years back. I met some of the other young educators on the project in other parts of the world. And each time it's such an enriching experience because we get to connect, to feel, to speak about our context, but also how those contexts relate to each other. Sufyan mentioned about neo-colonialism, neo-capitalism, things like that. The similar experiences and expressions that might look slightly differently, but fundamentally we're living in a world where what's the engine that's keeping it together, the systems, the economics of it, is why so many of the other things are existing. And so I've definitely learned a lot. I think equally in that learning was how we've grown as human beings. Because where we started off so many years ago to now, you're also seeing the growth of how we equally having showed up differently now compared to 5 or 4 years ago. So I'm actually stunned by it, and I'm hoping that 5 years from now we can still look back and say, look, we've actually done this much and we've learned so much, and we can also reflect perhaps in sessions like this. There is a point that I didn't say. It's the solidarity work. I think even in our own sessions and our own day-to-day work, I was able to call on Sufyan to speak on a panel and a webinar at some point. The same with other, not just from this project, but other global conferences and engagements we've had. And this increased sense of solidarity has been a powerful force that I think has given us hope in a time where so much of hope is seem to be lost. So I just wanted to add that last point.
Great, thank you. Sophia, we have maybe a minute or so left. Would you like to share your thoughts on this question, on your experience?
Yeah, thank you, Joanne, for the question. Very quickly, I share what Irfan said about that. I think it's like, like in the beginning for me, like this program, it was kind of, it's part of the work that I do. I was like, for me, it was a way to network with other people to learn more about human rights, about other things. But I didn't know that, it, like with time, it became, also, there is a personal side, I mean, in this program, like kind of friendships. And I think it's a very important tool, to do activism and to keep hope, especially sometimes in very bad context, like Ruth, Elisa, Irfan, Taizat, they are my friends now. And, like sometimes we exchange, like out of not only about the program, but also I know like if I go to South Africa, I will meet Irfan. And if he came to Morocco, he will visit me. And I think it's political also. It's personal, but it's political because it's a part of, it's the energy that we have, and it's kind of resource of our, the work that we do and the creativity that we can have in our context. And thank you, Joanne, for the question.
I think that's a wonderful way to wrap up the discussion. Thank you all so much to our speakers and everyone who participated, questions and inputs. I hand over to Ruth now for some closing remarks.
Thank you, Lucy. What can I say after hearing our wonderful speakers today? It's just a short closing remarks to say thank you to everyone who has come to this webinar and get to know firsthand Sophia and Irfan and Aizat. As we said, I also wanted to I'm always so touched by, as I say, by the change makers in all the different engagements that we have. As you have heard about their work, and also have the pleasure with some other colleagues here to follow these wonderful people for 5 years. And I hope to follow them for more years. More surprises, more energy, more friendship. But most important, and I think it has been mentioned by Irfan and Sofian, is that sense of solidarity, sense of hope, of reconnecting to what we were saying before about the commonalities that we all have. It is so inspiring. It just gives so much energy to realize that in a world where you just feel like everybody's on their own, you still find the spaces where you feel part of humanity again. And it's something that look and that energy into that I think it will help us coming back to the webinar series, and just to find some inner peace, starting from the individual, to find peace in the community. And also I'm linking a little bit what Sofian was more into the individual, Irfan. Aizat was more into procedures and changing human action. And I think Irfan is always elevating it more to the institutional, to the action to change, to ask actually, and that is my main understanding of human rights education is to do action and to demand to the ones who are responsible for the fulfillment, making our rights being fulfilled. That is our governments and institutions. So I think it's always nice to see how this group comes together to really show what is the power of human rights education. So I'm very inspired. I don't have many words. I mean, the ones who have the words are the speakers and our change makers, wonderful people. I didn't want to finish without thanking the 50% for inviting us to this webinar. I also want to thank Soka International with Lucy, Elisa, and Emi, and the rest for inviting us to co-organize together and to organize this webinar together between Amnesty International and Soka International. And I want to thank especially Emmy for being our moderator today. It was a pleasure to have you in this space. It also gives me pride that is, like younger people leading these spaces, and again coming to the hope, and this gives me hope for future peace. Also, so that was all from me, and I hope to see you in the next webinar series of Voices for Peace, and we will be sharing. Anna Sophia and the 50% will be sharing the recording. So if you want to share with your colleagues and networks, that will be wonderful. Thank you.